In today's lesson, we're going to look at two more biomes, the desert biome and the savanna biome. So today you're just taking 2 pages of notes as you follow along with this video, and there's no written assignment today to complete for classwork. However, tomorrow you will have an online quiz that is graded. It is an open notes quiz, and it is based on the 4 pages of notes that you'll have completed for this week. And so again, you can use your notes when you take that quiz tomorrow online. And you can also go back and rewatch these videos if that helps you to review these concepts. So let's start by looking at the desert biome. It is arid, dry, sandy, and barren, meaning it does not allow plants to grow. It doesn't have the nutrients to support it. As you can well imagine, the precipitation is very low, very small amounts of rainfall in the desert, less than 10 inches each year. Now, officially, some people define a desert as just by precipitation. So any place in the world that gets less than 10 inches of rain each year can be considered a desert. That does mean our tundra region that we studied yesterday, with only 4 to 6 inches of rain in a year, is actually considered a desert, according to that definition. However, for us, as we study our biomes, we're going to use the word tundra to differentiate a cold desert, and then use just the term desert for our typical hot desert biomes. So as you can imagine, the temperature is very hot. There is some difference in temperature between the winter and the summer, but for the most part, all the way around year-round, it's very high. And the temperature does drop significantly, sometimes 40, 50 degrees at night, because there's no vegetation to keep the land insulated. So at night, the temperatures drop and it gets pretty cool. The soil in the desert is usually sandy or very rocky, and that's partly because there's so little water that there's not erosion going on. So there are rocks that are there, and they're going to be there for thousands and thousands of years because there's no water to break them down. So it tends to be very rocky or sandy. And then it is also described as barren or infertile, meaning that there isn't nutrients in that desert that allows plants to grow. And of course, it is arid soil, very, very dry, and often looks cracked like that. Deserts are located mainly around the equator. So in North America, we have several different deserts, including the Mojave Desert, Mojave, as well as the Great Basin. We also have probably the most famous and largest hot desert is the Sahara Desert here in Africa, capital Sahara. In Asia, there's a number of different deserts. The Arabian Desert is right here in the southwestern part. And then on the eastern side, we have the Gobi Desert, Gobi. And Australia has a number of different smaller deserts, which altogether we just simply refer to as the Australian Desert. Let's take a look at some of the adaptations of the life in the desert. So a cactus has spines instead of leaves, and so those spines are actually adapted leaves. They reduce water loss, and then of course they protect them from getting eaten. Cactus also have shallow roots, and they sprawl, which means they spread out really wide, which helps them to quickly soak up water when it actually does rain. And then their stems are what we call succulent, which just means that they're kind of rubbery, and that allows them to hold a lot of water in them and be waterproof. Of course, you're familiar with a camel. Camels are probably best known for being able to hold a whole lot of water. They can drink 30 gallons of water in 3 minutes, and then they can go 6 months or more without water. Camels also have a thicker fur on the top part of their body, which provides shade for the skin underneath. And then underneath the camel, all of that hair is very thin to help it be able to give off heat more easily. Next, the Gila monster is a lizard famous in the desert for its very venomous bite. They are very rare to see, though, because they do usually burrow under rocks, or they actually burrow under the ground and spend most of their life underground, avoiding the heat from the sun. A couple more desert fauna is the fennec fox here. And the fennec fox, F-E-N-N-E-C, has very, very large ears. And those large ears actually help body heat to escape from it quickly. So the fact that they're just so large allows a lot of body heat to just be released through the ears up into the air. Their light color also helps them to deflect heat. And then their feet have very thick soles so that they can walk on the hot sand without burning their paws. Another critter found in the desert is a rattlesnake. They do hide underground to avoid the extremely hot temperatures. Rattlesnakes also have scales that are watertight, and that allows them to hold whatever water they have for long periods of time without having to drink. Our next biome is known as a savanna, and sometimes you'll hear it called a tropical grassland. So as the name implies, the savanna is covered in grasses, and it does have some trees, but they're very sparse, and not very many of them can be found. And again, we use that word tropical to refer to biomes where we only have two major seasons, a wet season and a dry season. So the precipitation in the savanna can be pretty high. It gets about 60 inches of rain, but it all kind of occurs at once. So it has very, very wet summers, and it can accumulate those 60 inches of rain in just a couple weeks or heavy, heavy downpours. And then the rest of the year, it has very dry winters. And those winters, where it's so dry, there's often issues with drought, and also wildfires are often pretty common around here. Those fires prevent trees from growing because, of course, it burns down the trees, the new young trees. And so that is one of the reasons why you don't have a lot of trees in these areas. Now, it is known as tropical, which means it's got those hot temperatures year-round. So if you're looking at our climate graphs here, you can see that the temperature is pretty consistently hot, and that's because these are mainly found around the equator. And so the difference between those seasons is not really the temperature. There is some slight difference, but it's really the rainfall. Now, this climate graph here is showing a savanna that is in the northern hemisphere in the top of Africa. And so its summer is here in June, July, and August. And you can see that rainfall is really heavy during that time period and pretty much no rain at all during the winter. This climate graph over here is showing a savanna that's in the very southern part of Africa. And so that's below the equator where the seasons are the opposite. So that means the June, July, August is actually the winter in that savanna since it's in the southern hemisphere and has opposite seasons. And so we have very little rainfall there. And then the heaviest rainfalls are in that summer for them, which is that December, January, February to March area. The soil in the savanna is very, very thin. It's got this topsoil layer where the grass grows, but there aren't a whole lot of nutrients because that layer is so thin and because there's a lot of clay underneath. The soil is very high in iron, and because of that, that makes the soil very acidic and red colored. So though grasses can grow, it isn't the super rich layers and layers of dark colored topsoil that we find here in our temperate forest in Virginia. It's just a thin layer of topsoil on the top. Locations of savannas, they are primarily found in South America, a large chunk here in Africa, African savannas, and then a pretty good section of Australia has savanna. And then there is a small part here in India that has savannas. Some of the creatures that we find in savanna, looking at the grasses, this particular grass is called Bermuda grass, Bermuda, and Bermuda grass is known because it reproduces very quickly. And instead of waiting to grow up and create seeds that reproduce, instead its roots just simply stretch out and it reproduces by those stretched out spreading roots. It does grow into a very dense mat, and those deep roots that it creates help it to stay alive. So during that dry season where it's not getting rain, the top part of the grass dies, and that's why we often see that tan color to the grasslands in the savanna. But the rest of it, the plant is alive underneath the ground with the deep roots. And then of course when it rains again, then it will turn green and start to photosynthesize again. The black mamba is famous for being a very venomous snake. It only takes 2 drops of venom to kill a human within 30 minutes. Thankfully, we have an anti-venom for it that we found. But it is known for not only being venomous, but also being incredibly fast. That's because it's got very shiny, streamlined scales, and that allows it to move through the grass very, very quickly. It uses its tongue to sense stimulus in the environment and then send it to a special organ called the Jacobson organ. And that, plus its excellent eyesight, is what helps it to detect the slightest movement of its prey. Another creature that the savanna is famous for, of course, is the lion, the African lion. And its tan color helps it to blend in. You'll find that a lot of savanna organisms are going to have that tan color because that's the color of the grassland during the dry season. They do have excellent vision in the dark, and that's important because they definitely prefer to hunt at night. They have a very muscular body, and having a muscular body uses a lot of energy for movement, and so they prefer to hunt at night, and they can do so because their vision is 8 times better than a human in dark. They also have loose skin underneath their bellies, and that's not because they're flabby, but it's because most of the creatures that they are capturing are herbivores that have hooves and are ungulates. And so they have that loose skin because when the hooves of that prey they're capturing is flailing around, the loose skin helps to protect them so that it doesn't accidentally impale one of their inner organs. 2 more creatures that are famous in the savanna are giraffes, Giraffe. And giraffes, of course, are known for their long necks, but they also can go weeks without water. In fact, most of the water they get is from the trees that they eat. And those trees that they eat that are found in the savanna are typically very thorny because the trees, like everything else, want to hold on to the water that they have during the dry season. So those thorns help the tree to be protected from animals that would want to eat it. So giraffes are able to eat those trees in part because they have that long neck, but also because they have a very thick tongue, so the thorns don't bother them when they eat. Finally, a leopard has a very flexible diet. In fact, leopards are found in savannas, but they also can be found in jungles, tropical rainforest as well. And that allows them to be very flexible in eating what is available to them. So during that wet season, when there's lots of young being born and all the animals are out, and everything's plentiful, they'll eat prey that's larger than themselves. But during that dry season, when a lot of animals are not very active, they will eat dead animals, carrion, so they'll eat the leftovers from a lion, and they'll even eat things like dung beetles. So that flexibility in their diet allows them to survive in the extremes of the savanna. That's all for today. Remember tomorrow to take your quiz.